Rising from the minutes, Jillian, would you like to, you've got a draft rates proposal, values and categories. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, well, I'm pleased to help facilitate this discussion that's very much prompted by that great work, Kim, that you started with this draft for that. So when we saw that come in, it's, I think it's beautifully starting to set the tone for the facility and what we're trying to do. But it felt like this is a great thing for us to start working with and discussing together. I wouldn't suggest perhaps that we all get deep into wordsmithing, as long as we recognize like the main values that we want to articulate, and then we can work on some of that precise language a little bit rather than take up all of our time here. But I really like the start with that mission and value statement that spoke about the design and the intention of the facility from that full community perspective, and really attempting to create something that is for the entire community with all of our diverse interests and skills and ideas of how we want to engage in that space. So I'm just starting and opening the floor for us all to start speaking about this. I'm not sure if Kim or you or Liam wanted to add anything to this in an overarching fashion, but how we think about this space for everyone all together.
Sure, I'll jump in because I threw it out. Thanks, Jillian. I mean, I literally threw that together just as an early draft to get the discussion rolling, and so a lot of it's just cut and paste, really. From my view, there was a few things that need to be added, like to talk about what we want to put in. Before we get into like the nuts and bolts of like numbers and how it's actually going to work, but the general tone of it was to try to encourage volunteerism, because I understand I would say the major threat that I felt was the costs, like what costs, what things are going to cost, and how that can have a negative impact in a lot of areas. It has a negative impact on the municipality, it has a negative impact on the facility itself, and it has a negative impact on the community and their ability to use it. So that document, the purpose of the document was to try and find a way to increase volunteerism and participation from a large, diverse part of the community in what I call the project of the community center. So the document was starting to divide things out and sort things out. So you've got different kinds of user groups and different kinds of activities that are considered, and that they would fit into certain boxes. You're absolutely right, Jillian. The devil's going to be in the details of the wordsmithing and what that captures. So from my perspective, what's needed next is, with each of those categories, there is another part to the rate that they pay, which is kind of a list of responsibilities or expectations that is from the groups when they're in a certain category. And so that's the other part of it. Like you get a subsidy, but with that subsidy, it's because not only of what you do in the community, but because of what you contribute back to the operations of the community center. So that's just the overarching kind of philosophy behind the document. And so, yeah, very much open to where there needs to be wordsmithing. As I said, it is a cut and paste from various other documents, just to cover certain categories and certain ideas. So I think going forward, today, maybe we can have a plan on another subcommittee or who wants to take on the work of refining that document and adjusting it so it fits better what the community center is going to be. So that's just helps everybody understand a little bit more context about what the next steps are and what needs to be developed for the document to be more relevant. The only other thing I would add is that it is a living document. And it's another thing that I think is important to this is that the document reflects a process and not a definitive statement. And then as it moves forward and things get added and adjusted to it, especially when it starts to be used in a larger context, that everyone who interacts with the document understands the living document nature of it, that it will be adapted and adjusted. So, and does anyone else want to speak to it?
I thought it was really helpful and it gave me a much better idea of what you were talking about before in terms of how you'd set it up with you referred to presentation house in terms of some sort of sliding scale. I'm not sure about the parable, and if we can think of a better one, you know, it's like if leaving people out for some reason, and it's you know, it works, but it's there's a little jibe to it. So I'm not sure that I like that part of it in terms of all the people that might be negative. Yeah. I think it's really good. I'm more than happy to wordsmith. I love doing wordsmithing, so you know, I can play with that. But overall, it's quite fantastic in terms of. I think this will help people. Sorry, I didn't put my hand up. But
That's all right, Judy. I'm happy for another parable. I will defend it a little bit, because one of the things that we've encountered was I felt that things go off the rails when there is a sense of entitlement that isn't based on somebody actually putting the work in. So what can throw things off the rails is people who arrive late to the game, who just arrive there and they say, "This is for me because of me."
Yeah, no, the second paragraph's fabulous, and I just think that, and it's workable. But if there is a better one that people can think of, then it might be. I don't know. Sorry.
Just because it's our first meeting, Chair, just are making sure you can see the digital hands. Are those
digital hands? I'm looking for digital hands.
Oh, so we're up at the top left of the square of the person's face. That looks like, so Jillian's got her hand up.
Oh, they're digital hands. I'm sorry, I thought you meant a clock. Yes, Jillian, I'm seeing that. I shall chair better. Thank you.
Okay,
Digital hands. Yes, go ahead, Jillian.
Well, I may actually defer to Liam to, like I could speak after him. I realized that there was a piece to this that I wanted to present in the beginning, and I apologize to that, but it felt to me that we're actually developing, that we could separate out the core values and principles from the rates document, and making sure that we're agreeing on those values and not about how they're constructed in this format necessarily. And it's values that are equitably across the facility. This is what we believe in. And so then we're not then having a separate set of principles to one particular user group, because I think everything about this facility, everything from the planning, the fundraising, the work that's gone into it, has been a result of very broad community representation. And I think we put ourselves in a very dangerous position if we're actually, trying to evaluate what that commitment in the past or present may be, and making some assumptions about people's intentions that may not be accurate. So sorry, Liam, I just said I was going to give it to you, and then I just spoke anyway. So well, quiet.
Oh, that's quite all right. But I want to start first with Kim. Thanks so much for diving into this. I got two things that I wanted to touch on. One is just like clarity around how we do the work, and then the work that you did in and of itself. And so I thought we had agreed that yourself and Fraser and I were going to pair off and work on this bit. And so, but then you dove right in and did this great work and just shared it broadly across the whole group. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but it did catch me off guard a little bit because I thought that the three of us were going to try. And truth be told, the weeks just started ripping by very fast, and like, oh my gosh, when were we going to get together? And then you just went ahead and did that work. So I think as a group, as a committee, I think we want to just pay attention to that. Like if there's going to be these commitments to pair off and work together to try to follow through with that. And then secondly, again, just echoing, like, thank you so much for your efforts here and for getting this ball rolling, because often I find that's the most difficult bit, is get past that blank piece of paper to something that we can all start to take a stab at. I did start doing going through it and adding some comments and stuff, because I do think that we want to make sure that it is as inclusive as we, I think, all want it to be. And right now it does feel a bit heavy on the performing arts side of things. And so want to make sure that we're being inclusive of the other uses of the facility as much as possible. And I can easily share those comments, like a track change version with my comments in there. I do get a bit worried about, and Jillian was articulating it a bit there too, about this idea of those community groups and individuals that help plan, fundraise, and build the center will benefit the most in using it. Maybe that's from the perspective of that they'll get some more internal and intrinsic value from and benefit. But I don't think that we as a municipality can be restrictive in any way, shape, or form about who gets to use this facility in terms of like whether or not they contributed to its development. I think we got to be really careful there. So just because a user group wasn't part of the fundraising or the planning doesn't mean that they're any less deserving of use. And so I'd be really careful about that kind of language. So I kind of like what I heard Jillian saying in terms of like maybe we're pulling the core values and the principles of use into a separate document, and then building like the rate sheet, like the one that I sent around, that's like just really like literally like here are the rates as a separate thing. And tying them together somehow. But ultimately, thank you, Kim, for getting this going. It's not an easy task to put pen to paper, and I think you've done a great job at initiating that. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other comments? I'll just add one thing, which was what the impetus was for it. And Liam, I apologize, I didn't get to you. I literally had forgotten that the committee included you, and I thought it was Fraser. So I sent it to Fraser and said, should I send it to everybody? And Fraser said, yep, send it to everybody. And so I did that instead of send it to Liam and then decide to send it to everybody. But note taken. I think
no worries.
yeah.
Technically, I'm not even on the committee. And so,
yeah.
But I remember in that meeting, the three of us had stuck our hands up to say we would work on it. And it's in the minutes. And so I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
it's a good point. Yeah, and just to address the issues, I know that Jillian, you have brought up, where this has come from is actually from the MOU. And I think I need some clarity around this, because I completely understand the municipality's desire for the community center to be very broad. However, when I read the MOU, it's constructed that the hearth has a special place, and it is prioritized use in one of the venues. And so I have a concern that in our attempts to make it equitable, that MOU is not honored. And so I question why the MOU was drawn up in that way. Like, why was the MOU created that gave the hearth a special priority over just one of the venues? And that's also why it raised the flag about multi-purpose versus multi-use. So, and I guess maybe I don't understand, but from when I read the MOU, what I was understanding is that the recreation room was a priority for the recreation department, and that the performance hall venue was a priority for the hearth, or for the community through the hearth. At least that's what I read in the MOU. So I was trying to find a way of reflecting that within a document that will be a use document. And so where it raises a flag for me is that if we create a very equitable document that doesn't address that, then people within the community who have that understanding, who've looked at the MOU, they're going to have they'll have flags raised for them. And so I was trying to find a way of communicating that concept in a broader way, unless I'm misunderstanding the MOU, right? Unless I've missed something in reading it. So maybe if you could help me understand that the idea that the MOU created, right? Yes, Judy.
There's been a tension in terms of figuring out what the best use of the performance space is. And that whole thing in the, I'm not sure if it's the MOU, I guess it is, in terms of trying to figure out how to get performance use out of the performance space. And because that's the probably the most beneficial in terms of money coming in. And then there's a whole lot of other recreational and broader community uses that are just as important, but may not be able to help as much with the operating budget. So it was, and I think that the both the benefits and the responsibilities in terms of the hearth really need a lot of work. So if there's high expectations and no resources, we have to be realistic in terms of what can be piled on the responsibilities of the hearth. There's a whole lot of other groups that are not necessarily closely connected to the hearth that are just as eager and important in terms of music groups and other theater groups and you know, just all sorts of off-island interests that could be coming in and using the space that would be really good value in terms of, you know, selling a $25, $35 ticket. And to get that all organized as early as possible. And I know that there's a longer timeline in terms of getting some of those contracts organized. And then giving a deadline, having some parameters in terms of you've got, you know, maybe first dibs, but you got to fill it up. And then, you know, whatever the rest of the space might be used for. I mean, it can't be active sports in terms of all the lighting and the installations, but you know, it can be meetings and it can be lots of other community groups, and that could be council meetings, you know, if there's no sets up and all the rest of it. So things that don't bring in money but would make good use of the space and would love to use the space. So I think that's my understanding of what the balance was, that we need to try and have income, and that's the best source of it. But at the same time, we need to recognize that there's a much broader potential user groups.
Thank you, Judy. Rob, go ahead. And then Liam.
Thanks, Kim. I just want to say thank you, particularly for the comments that you made in circulating the document about the language around multi-use spaces versus multi-purpose, and recognizing that the spaces are actually purpose-built with particular, you know, specializations, and that helpful in recognizing that the purposes of the design and equipping of the spaces do prioritize certain uses, but they are multi-use spaces, and that you can, of course, you know, have physically have a meeting or a yoga class in a space that's designed for performance, but not necessarily the other way around. And so it's important to recognize that. I just want to appreciate that distinction, which I would support in our community.
Thank you, Rob. Liam.
Thanks, Kim. I think maybe a bit of semantics, because historically we've referred to the rooms as the small multi-use room, or the small multi-purpose room, or the large multi-purpose room, or the small multi-use room. I don't think it really, I think we could go with either way. So if multi-use sits better with folks, then that's fine in my books. And Judy, I think you've paraphrased or sort of captured the essence of the MOU quite well. I think I agree that there's clarity in that MOU that there is, you know, there's been a long relationship with the Hearth and the performing arts sector to build something of this nature to serve that community and that use. And so I think that I agree that there's a real, from a revenue generation point of view, that is probably one of the best opportunities there. I just think we've got maybe in our rate policy or documents, we just got to come right out and say that and be clear about that, and not couch it in some language that becomes open to interpretation and difficult to understand. So we just, and I know that the way we've talked about it from a practical operating perspective, there's always been this idea of, you know, there will be multiple times in the year, maybe it's scheduled like so that it's quarterly, where the rec staff and the Hearth folks and other key stakeholders and like the facility manager are sitting down and looking at scheduling use and like and in particular the large multi-use room, and sort of saying like, okay, who's got what and who needs space when, where, and for what. And there is that idea that there's a priority for the arts community through the Hearth, and so we want to respect that and make sure that that is factored in with certainty. But I do think that if we're talking about overarching policy, the facility has more to offer than just that large multi-use room. Right, there's the lounge, there's the small multi-use room, there's the other meeting rooms, and there is the rec room, which is more dedicated to rec. And so maybe we really focus on that broad inclusivity language for the policy statement itself, and then we get more specific about, okay, this room, we anticipate these types of things, and this, and perhaps these types of activities and or groups have prioritization. And then we get into that categorization of subsidized rates or not subsidized.
Thanks, Liam. Jillian, you have your hand up.
Thanks. I just wanted to add, I think from my understanding of what's written in the MOU that it was more about priority of use of space as opposed to differentiating different scales of rate of pay in terms of prioritization towards the Hearth and the use of the space. So and adding to that, I think in some ways, some of the lines have blurred a little bit since the development of that MOU. I was not part of that. So for example, I think I know in the past, there was a much stronger differentiation between who produced which type of programming, right? So the recreation department in the past generally did things that could be described primarily in that fitness category or camps, for example. And then there was the community learning arm, mostly facilitated through Sarah Haxby and the school. And then there was the programming from the Arts Council. And together, that trilogy essentially created what we were calling programming. So that is not under the same structure anymore. So for example, we're running art classes, we're running drama classes, we're running pasta making, bread making, all of these sort of lifelong learning types of opportunities. So I felt that if we didn't create those broadly encompassing principles across the board for all of our users, then it starts to get more subjective. How do you define what category somebody falls into if you're allocating the rates or which room they're? And I think sometimes theater groups, for example, may want to rent a smaller space for rehearsals, Or there's some types of classes that can't fit in the fitness studio or in the small multi-purpose room. So I think it's a little bit blurry sometimes. So I just want to make sure what we're developing accounts for that.
Very good. Thank you, Jillian. I think that maybe, oh, and Mimi, hi, welcome. Glad you're here.
Hi.
Is that your hand up to speak, or is that to say
Yes.
hi?
Hi, yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask if there's been consideration of the mandate from the library, from the annex. The wording there might be of interest as well of what they're incorporating.
Very good. Thanks, Mimi. Going forward, I suggest that maybe what we do is we have two kind of subcommittees. One subcommittee will look at the overarching values and mission statement document. And I agree with Liam and Jillian that we want to create a document that captures the entire facility. But I think it actually has to include like the council room as well, and offices, because those kind of mission statements and value statements are about everybody who's in the building, right? And how the building is going to work. And so I would look for people who want to volunteer to like sit on a subcommittee to go in and work on that aspect of the document. And we do, as Liam suggests, we separate the draft proposal I did, and people tackle that larger sort of values based document. And they would also be charged with having the challenge of figuring out how to reflect the concept of multi-use, that some spaces are built to do certain things which are different. Because that also is important, that you don't create this in the attempts of being broad and fair, that it becomes everything being the same when it isn't, right? Like some spaces are better for other things and you have an MOU. But what we need is a document that reflects the overall value and mission of it. And that's a job, right? And then separate out, as Liam was suggesting, the rates discussion and how the nuts and bolts work and how that's going to function as a separate job, like a separate thing to look at. Is everybody in favor of, can someone want to propose that as an action, that we kind of set those two tasks up for ourselves? Yes, Judy?
Sure. I can propose that there be two subcommittees to break down this draft document. So some of us to work on mission and value statement and core values, and or others to work on the principles and the rate structure.
That's right. That's correct. That's what I propose. Is everyone okay with that? Not seeing anybody flash their hands. Oh yeah, Fraser says yes. So now who wants to some action volunteers to sit on which group? Happy to, no one, like, let's do the first committee values. You Judy, you wanted to do the values and mission one. You're a great wordsmith.
Sure.
And anyone else want to join Judy on that? Mimi, great. And I see Fraser's child is going to do it as well. Excellent. Then it'll be in a simple language, which is good for certain people. Language of a 2-year-old. Excellent. Anyone else on that? The two of you?
I could be part of that.
Oh, you want to be part of that, Jillian?
Well, I thought maybe we should have a third or so.
No, for sure. It does help. It's a good consideration to see that. And it does sort of separate things out. And then the actual getting involved in the nuts and bolts and the kind of not just rate structure, like what it is, but like how we start to play with the idea of categories and what those categories could be, and then how they relate to the equitable, broader use of it. And that's more in the nuts and bolts, because that Fraser has his hand up to do that. Judy, is you wanting to do that as well?
If I can make a comment, the other material that we got that was from Port Coquitlam and the school board there, School District 43, and similar ones from West Van, School District 45, and they differentiate between different groups and how they might be able to afford things and where and why they should be subsidized. So those were also helpful.
Yes, I thought they were excellent documents. Thank you, Liam. The one thing also, and I did a little bit of looking at the Roundhouse, and one of the things I thought was smart what they did is they actually don't publish their rates. They say call and ask, which I thought was good, particularly when we don't, because in that rate discussion, I'm still not sure what we're trying to solve. Like, I don't know how much money we're trying to generate and what the money is being generated for. So that's another part of figuring out what those rates should be, is you kind of need to figure that out, because then you can look at what you're trying to make happen, right? And what costs you're trying to cover. And that's in the details. And I find that although the school board documents are helpful, they're not trying to solve that problem. They're just setting a broad rate, and they do it. It's like North Van Rec and Cultural Commission. They just set a broad rate. It's only one source of their revenue that they have. So that's just a part of that discussion. So who would like to participate in that? I'm assuming, Liam, you're going to be involved in that because you would have that information. Fraser, is that your hand up to participate in that?
Yeah, and over the past 2 weeks, I talked to theater groups here on the island, and I've got a list of who's been paying what for how many shows. What does that incorporate? In terms of a tech rehearsal, dress rehearsal, those sorts of things from a theater perspective. So I can share all of that with the subcommittee once we get kind of going a little bit more there. But just as like a little, idea, it's all over the map depending on the venue, anywhere from like 600 to 1600 for a run shows.
Great. And Kristen, does that have your hand up to sit on that committee, or you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the call and ask process for rate setting. It's very different from what typically the model that we would typically use in a municipality, because we do need to get all of our rates, our fee, it's part of our fee bylaw, and get that approved by council. So it scares me, call and ask, because it's like, oh, well, if you're one person, you'll get one rate. Like, for me, it feels like a little bit of, I would prefer accountability and transparency, and here's the rate set, and these are what are approved by council. So I
think very good, Kristen. I think we talked about using a range to try and figure out how to create some flexibility. I think that not that we're trying not to be transparent at all. It's just trying to figure out what the revenue is that we're supposed to be trying to generate, and figuring out how to communicate that. I just know that when you're running, it's particularly around things like performing arts facilities, where you have revenue generation through ticket sales and expectations, and there's inherent risk in that, right? So the venue doesn't take the risk. That's what happened, because you set your rates. So the users of the venues take all the financial risk. So there needs to be some flexibility in talking and working with people who are literally taking financial risk. When you set up a class and you're not charging a ticket revenue to come in, and you have a fee structure for people who pay a nominal fee, they sign up, in advance. But when you start putting on public events, and it's not just performing arts, any public event that goes on in there where they're trying to generate through ticket sales, you need to have flexibility when you're dealing with those people, or else you will not be responsive to what's going on in the community. So I'm hoping you'll sit in on this subcommittee, Kirsten, to help us reach that goal and create a document that the city, that the municipality can pass, but still somehow gives the ability for it to survive and thrive. And adjust.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to be part of that group.
Great. Judy.
I also note that in the rates overview, there was a paragraph in here in terms of the current rate categories for recreational space, and I don't know what those are. So if there is like a document of some kind that you referred to, or Jillian, to others to look at, then I think that would be helpful for that group.
No, that's something that's under review and needs a lot of work still. So we don't have anything to draw upon on that. And we don't have a rate categories, particularly for this new facility. Not yet, not there yet.
Okay. Do you have a
Yeah,
list similar to
so
what
just-
Fraser was getting in terms of what the expectations are for people that are, using the children's center or using the school or some of those other venues that we've got now?
Yeah, I think Liam was answering
Or I was
answering
just
part of that. Oh,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, currently what we do is we lease recreational space. And so that's our rate, is what our lease rate is, that we're leasing, right? And so when we move into the new space, we don't have to lease it from ourselves for our rec programs, but we want to know, well, okay, well, what was that lease rate? And then that's kind of almost factored into that idea that, okay, take the municipal hall, for example. The municipal hall, we spend about like, what is it, about $100,000 a year on lease rates for the municipal hall. That will be converted into debt payments, effectively a mortgage payment to take, to become an owner of the facility. And so then what we'll be needing to figure out is, well, now all of a sudden we can rent out that rec space if we wanted to, which we've never really had the opportunity to do before because it wasn't ours, because it was the children's centers. So we will want to be thinking about, okay, well, what is the appropriate rate for renting that space out? That's why we don't have that kind of rate structure for the rec programs, because we've been the renter ourselves. And so, but yeah, we want to look at that for sure. And yeah, that's all I have.
Thanks, Liam. I'm just going to move us along. And if it's all right with everybody, I don't mind participating in both committees, just as the chair, just to find out, like, if you need to be help to be organized a bit, or if you're having those meetings, just to find out what's going on. But oh, look at this, you've done it. Look at that. Thank you, Steph, you've done it. So yeah, she's just sharing that document, which good, excellent. And I'm just trying to work out my screen here. Oh, I'm having a hard time doing this. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, if everybody's okay with that, because we have an action coming out of that, sort of that first discussion. And of course, it's cost policy, rate sheets, and fee structure subcommittee, which we kind of talked about in terms of beginning to continue to work on that. It certainly is oh, go ahead, Jillian. I see you have your hand up.
yeah, I'm sorry. I just feel that actually it's important to have someone who's directly representing the Hearth to be part of that subcommittee, working on the values.
Excellent. So there you go. And since Rob is going to be missing in action, we were kind of hoping someone from the Hearth, and if everyone is okay, we do have a few members of the Hearth who are participating. Jamie, can we give you a nudge to join that subcommittee?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jillian. I'd be happy to help out, but I will be away for almost the whole month in November, and out of not answering emails. So I can do a little bit in the next 2 weeks, but after that, I'm not around.
Well, I think even if you read what they come up with, it'll be very helpful just to get that set of eyes on it.
For sure. Happy
Yeah,
to.
and I think it's a living. I will just say again, I see it as a living document. So even as we begin to share it more broadly, we're wanting to keep it continually to be evolving to make sure that it captures what it's supposed to, and not try and present it as a fait accompli. Is there anything else in relationship to where we need to go next with the, a rate, fee, cost structure, the overarching document, the categories? Like, this is, again, the document was just to get us started with a conversation and make sure that we're building something that's going to work. I have one thing that I just, as I heard you talk, Liam, about the relationship between the recreation department of the Bowen Island municipality and the use of that facility versus all the other community users. I just think that that's going to be something that the overarching mission, vision, value document will be part of addressing. I mean, because at some point, so which box do we put that in? And I think if it's addressed in the larger document box, it'll be easier when we start getting into which user groups are doing what, because then they'll understand how the space is being utilized by the departments of the municipality. Does that kind of make sense? Because the recreation department is a department of the municipality, whereas all the other user groups are not. So somehow that needs to be made clear how that's going to work. As you said, you used to be a renter and now you're a landlord. So that's a different thing.
Yeah, can I jump in, Kim?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And like, for example, there may be other times like where council is taking on a big initiative. Maybe it's an official community plan or something like that, and there's a desire to have like a big meeting and use that large multi-use space for that type of a thing. Does the municipality charge itself for that, or is that just like something that has to be worked out in the scheduling, or
it's an excellent point. And just I would when we can discuss that at a subcommittee level, but
right.
in my experience, it's better when you've identified what you're trying to generate revenue for. We always do an in-out at our space, even though it's an in-kind transaction, because then it's transparent.
Yeah.
It's transparent what we're contributing to where it's going to.
Right.
So in other words, we're paying our own bills because we're responsible for it. And we used to give it away for free to ourselves, and it was not a useful way of trying to figure out where our problems were, right?
Right.
Because we're using it so other people can't rent it. And so therefore we needed to know that. So anyway, but that's it's a good point. It's a good, and again, the more it's clear up front in the overarching values document and mission document, the easier it is to work the other things down on the other end, because you know why you're doing it. So the first document is the why, and the second document is the how.
Yeah.
Very good. I'm going to just move on then, if there's no more comments on that, because we've struck, our two subcommittees to continue to work on it. And the next one, which was the subcommittee work on the management model. And by that, I think I meant trying to get underneath the operational costs that could be associated with the use of the spaces. And those are labor-related costs. And again, and this is where I was proposing about where the increase in volunteerism can really help in that area. Because when you have the public coming into the space, there are certain positions that need to be there. And when you're having public coming into any space and you're charging money for them to participate or to see something, then there are other costs, which have to do with like front of house, box office, all that kind of stuff, and ushering. And it's the organization of all of that that can be labor intensive and challenging. So when I looked at what the management model was more about beginning to create a kind of a plan for how that's all going to be addressed. And that is going to have an impact on the costs of running the venue, right? And so it's good to have that started to be worked on, and how much of it can be done through existing staff, the staff that's already hired to be part of the community center, additional contract staff that's specialized, and then also volunteerism. And that's why I was trying to include that in the user group model, volunteerism that can be drawn upon, and not just for, let's say, I'm, going to put it up my Parcheesi club in there every Tuesdays. And so I would, volunteer for my Parcheesi club, but would I also volunteer on a Friday night because I know the space and I know how to open it and I've got the keys and all that to work in a different context as volunteer hours. So that's what I meant about what a management model might look like. So open for some broad discussion, and then maybe we can try and move that towards another action. So any comments on that from anyone? Either it was insanely clear or nobody understood what I was talking about.
I get it. It makes sense.
I think I need a little more information, Kim, just
Sure.
on the, I get the three sort of categories, but
Yeah.
yeah.
What I'm trying to figure out is, we'll set up as a group to try and help develop a policy document, which would inform and it's all beyond the policy. It's also like a cost document, like an analysis of what like related to how much activity is going on. So basically, who's going to do what while it's running, that can help determine, and who's going to pay for it, and where's that money going to come from, or where's that labor going to come from. So I'm happy to help contribute my experience in running events in our space about the kind of list of personnel and number of hours it takes to do something like that, and then how much of it is volunteer and how much of it you actually pay for. Yes, Chris.
Well, I was just kind of thinking in terms of like the Bowen Island Public Library has their partnership with the Bowen Island Public Library Foundation, Friends of the Bowen. So they have a group of volunteers that do things outside of the library operations itself to do fundraising, to do a lot of work that benefits the library. So I was thinking that somewhere in the network of interested artists and people who are wanting to use the space, that there be sort of some kind of conversation started around maybe not going as far as organizing a society, but at least an interested group of artists and other theater type people who want to volunteer their time to help the arts, the shows thrive in this community. Because I think if it's going to work, and it's going to work on a volunteer level, we obviously can't have all of these additional people on a paid staffing basis. It's going to have to come from the grassroots, like you said. So I would encourage people in the arts community to start having those conversations and thinking about ways that they could help and start planning for that, because that's a really good point. Like the additional, there's the technical stuff, but there's also just the people around to help you find your seat, yeah, it's a good point.
Excellent, Kristen. And I think what I've got you, Jamie. The thing to remember is that when it comes to volunteer coordination, that is a paid position. You can't have a volunteer organizing volunteers. That doesn't work. So in building our model, we have to figure out how to build the structure of volunteerism, and how is that who's going to cover that? Jamie, you had your hand up, and then Judy.
Sure, thanks. So there is a subcommittee as part of the Hearth Board called the Performing Arts Committee that's been probably doing some really great work for almost a year, maybe. We've already started reaching out to the local performing community to hear their thoughts on using the facility. And even tentative dates have been brought forward. So maybe, Kristen, maybe that's the group you're thinking of, or another group, or I'm not sure, what you're thinking.
No, I wasn't thinking of a specific group. I'm saying there's a need for a group of people to get together to help build that. Kim, I think that's a great point, having a coordinator that's paid. And I would also at this time just kind of like to bring up the Community Hall and Arts Center Endowment Fund at the Bowen Island Community Association. Community Foundation and wonder how does that fit into it? And maybe that's a perfect piece for that source of funding to help offset those costs each year.
Thank you. Judy. Oh, I think you're on mute, Judy.
When you talk about getting underneath the operational costs and labor and equipment and some sort of increase in volunteerism, I started thinking of all the different operations and all the different activities that would, if we can make a list in terms of all the things that we need. So there's a reception desk, and there's going to be tours maybe. There's certain welcoming and guiding people to where they're wanting to find things. Whoever's opening up and locking up in terms of making sure that there's some sort of security routine and training. There's caretaking, and I think that's whatever whoever's responsibility. I'm in terms of a cost of the operating of the center. There's potentially installations and displays and notice boards and keeping that all organized. I know that that's a problem on the ferry in terms of getting somebody that'll do that regularly. You mentioned all the technical stuff in terms of all this fancy equipment that's going in and who's going to understand how to use it properly and or train people, and how do we give permission to somebody that's do we give permission to somebody that's coming in with another group to handle anything. And then just all of the issues around coordinating all of these different, potentially different interest groups on the island, individuals and groups that might be interested in programming, and how to get, it's like herding cats in some ways in terms of making sure that not everybody wants to do the Halloween party and not everybody wants to do just the Valentine's party and whatever. But I think if we thought of all the different tasks or all the different jobs that there would be around there to make it fabulous, then we need to think about how many can be volunteer and how many need to be paid, and what all the different job descriptions might be and how to fill that in. So I know the Hearth operates really well with a lot of volunteers, but it's a lot of work to get that up and running and to keep it going. So that's not an easy thing, and I agree with you in terms of if we can figure out some money in the operating account for at least, at the very least, a good honorarium, then that would go a long way to making sure that this works.
Wow, Judy, you are so good at lists. I hope you wrote that down. Well, we have it recorded. You are a list maker.
I am good at lists.
Impressive. Liam.
Mute.
Yeah, that is a impressive list, and that's why Kim's the chair, because he's going to take care of all of that. No, I'm kidding.
I'm going to delegate.
Yeah. But I do like that idea. And we have been doing a bit of that, or perhaps a lot of that, in the development of the operations plan, so to speak, like the sort of operating budget for the facility too. And so that's why we do need facility manager and custodial staff, which are in the budget for the project and for the municipality for going forward. And the idea is that those staff will be the people that open and close the facility, right? This is the type of facility I don't think we're, especially in the beginning, are going to be comfortable allowing for it to be volunteer positions that would do such a thing. There's a real need to ensure that the facility is safe for opening, right? That sidewalks are clear, that salt is thrown down, that toilets are accessible, and all of those types of good things. And so that's all been factored into the operating budget and the staffing plan for the facility. And from a technical use perspective, it is for a lot of us, it's a bit like daunting, and none of us are technical, like sound technicians or audio technicians. And so the model that we're contemplating from an operational point of view is that we would and we would look to this committee to perhaps help in the development of this, is the creation of a RFQ, a request for qualifications, to go out to the community to identify and solidify a list of qualified professionals that can operate the technical AV equipment, because it's high-end, good quality equipment that we want to make sure that is used properly and maintained properly and not abused. And so if I wanted to rent the facility to have like a massive party with me and my 50 best friends, which might be hard to find, then we're going to have to hire one of the qualified professionals from the list to actually operate the sound and AV system. We can't just let Liam rip loose in the sound booth there and those types of things. But so I'm almost just saying this to let folks know that a lot of thinking has been going into that, and some of these elements have been built into the operating budget already. But we're going to, I do like that idea of like going through and making sure we're thinking about all those things, because inevitably we will have forgotten things. And
Yeah, thank you so much, Liam. And I would just make sure adding to that the notion of how much the facility will be used. So imagine it starting at 6 a.m. and finishing at midnight, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So when you look at that kind of labor, it's just make sure we don't build a position that's a unicorn position and expect one full-time employee that's hired to fulfill a schedule like that. So
yeah, no,
that's why I go like
we,
many hands make light work, and figuring out a model to that can, not that will be that, but that the model can grow into that. And so that is often the challenge that municipalities face when they put facilities that are performance-oriented facilities and recreation or community center facilities within their structures, like within their own administrative and building structures, because they just go, what do you mean you're using it Sunday morning at 6 a.m.? And then there's a group in at 10 o'clock Sunday night. And our custodian is only hired on a 37-hour work week, and we're paying them X. So we now have to pay 3 people that to keep this place going. Exactly. So that's what I'm trying to avoid, is that kind of structure. So may I propose that's when I said management committee as a concept, it was really to get underneath that, is to start looking at it from not the user side, so much of what the users are doing, but from the operational side about how that's going to work. And those are all really good ideas. I think what this leads to is the referring to the hearth, because the hearth appears in the MOU, and I'm asking this because I'm not part of the hearth and I have not been participating in discussions, which it seems to me a bit of the elephant in the room is how much of the hearth is a responsibility is the hearth taking on in this area and expected to be taking on, and what's the hearth's relationship with the municipality? Because it's still not clear to me that if the hearth is the conduit for all the user groups within the arts community to participate in that side, because it seems to reflect on the one side, we have the recreation department of the Bowen Island municipality as a kind of an organizing structure, thanks to Jillian, right? And your job that you have with the municipality and the work that you're doing and understanding that. And on the other side, we have the hearth, which isn't the same thing. It's not the same thing as Jillian, right? It's not a department of the Bowen Island municipality. And is that representative of all the user groups, or are they just one user group and then there's something else? So that's also what I mean about the management model of like how, and I just need some clarification in that, not necessarily today, but it would be another good subcommittee to go and do some work and report back to this committee, kind of looking at all of that, and also like how it's going to work. So open to any suggestions. There's not too many of us here. Seems like we're all on a subcommittee just giving ourselves work between meetings, but
We had
so any,
last meeting, we had Rob, Fraser and Julian on that subcommittee. We're clear on that.
and I'm imagining well, Rob unfortunately is just said he's not going to have a lot of time. I imagine Fraser's still participating in that committee. And is there, again, I would, now that people have a better understanding of it, seems to me that it is good to have, I hate to do this, Jillian, but like somebody who's, from the municipality's perspective on that and what we're trying to do, and somebody from the Hearth's perspective on that. And are we open to having somebody who isn't necessarily on this committee, but is, say, part of the Hearth or part of the Performing Arts Committee that is meeting, join that committee, because it's going to reflect what the expectations are, right? And like how much we can rely on that to make sure we build something that's going to work. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Oh yes, thank you, Judy.
I think you're right in terms of that is the gigantic elephant in the room, and it's something that it has been not talked about for probably the entire life of this project. And it is something that needs to be sorted out in terms of what the expectations are and what the responsibilities are and what's realistic in terms of workload, and how to meet all of those challenges. I would suggest that some of the people that are on the Performing Arts Committee at the Hearth would be very helpful with this. If we can accept, Rob would be fabulous. Jamie would be fabulous. Rob's going to be out of commission in terms of anything except, run this by me and see whether or not there's some input. And Jamie's going to be away. So I think we need to get the Performing Arts Committee people involved. And there's some good performers on that have lots of good experience. And if they've been beating the bushes to see, what other groups in the community might be picking up some time and interest. And I think that the expectations and the relationship is something that we've fussed with a little bit with the MOU, but we haven't sorted out in terms of what the expectations and responsibilities are. And I think there's some rough patches that we need to try and work through. And it's something that really needs time and attention to build on in terms of going ahead with this. So it's not a department of the municipality, and I think that's part of the difficulty in terms of trying to figure out what the relationship is, so that there's lots of good precedent and expectations in terms of how the recreation department is run. I suppose with Jillian, we're actually a full-time director instead of the full-time project manager or whatever the title is in terms of the building construction, then that might be helpful too. But I think that this is something that really does need, it's foundational and it really does need to be sorted out. So
Thank you, Judy. Jillian, and then Rob, you're next.
I absolutely agree with what Judy's saying, and I'm not quite sure even how that is worked out somewhat. But my thoughts about this subcommittee is that I think the experience, Kim, you and Rob both bring in terms of understanding all of those logistics in terms of what has to be done. I think somebody with your level of experience is really critical to this. And I think there's a couple of things that'll be really important to us. One is that we're actually based in reality. And I really appreciated your comment about this management plan that we may be developing is somewhat aspirational down the road. It's not necessarily right now. And I think we need to be always cognizant of the budget for this and people understanding that, yes, I do run a department of the municipality, but this department is not scheduled to grow to now operate a new facility. It's with my current existing staff team. And that's a really important piece. And I also think, and I anticipate some response to this. So it may be a confrontational thing slightly what I'm about to say, and I apologize, but I do feel that, because the Hearth gets the core funding from the municipality annually, part of that is precisely to develop programming. So in some ways, and that is to represent cultural initiatives and develop cultural initiatives, it's on behalf of the municipality for the community. So there is an element of department-like existence of the Hearth to date, I believe.
Thank you, Jillian. Rob.
Well, and on that note, the same, fiscal scenario exists, that the Hearth is not scheduled to grow in its allocation from the municipality or other funding in the near term. And so it's all about how we all work together to, encourage participation from various sectors in the use of the whole facility. The Hearth's capacity to be a significant sort of administrative and programming driver of the performing arts activity in the facility will be limited just by, again, reality. But of course, its mission is to to encourage and inspire and activate arts activity of all disciplines and genres, and so it's all about figuring out how can we find the right model that will not that can be managed without really increasing the cost base of those existing departments if there's not funding for it, but to coordinate the inflow of activity, to invite programming, to not to be necessarily responsible for delivering a certain amount of programming, but basically to invite participation from the whole community through the connections that we have in the arts sector, through the connections that the municipality has in the recreation sector, and sort of jointly encouraging the active use of the community center in all its aspects. I mean, that's a vision we all share, and none of us have more money to do it. So, and I would venture to say that in the current climate of the Hearth's budget, we're really constrained in imagining how we bring additional resources to the table beyond what we've certainly the energies that we've been bringing toward the development of the community center transition into energies that are brought to the operation of the center. All of that sort of makes sense. But it is something where we're in discussion internally about how we can manage to support that growth of aspirations to make best use of this incredible new facility. So Gail Lautenberg joined us in the early part of the meeting. She's the chair of the Hearth's Performing Arts Committee, which recently formed because of the new opportunities that will be available with the new venue. Gail is a busy person, but might be a great contributor to this sort of discussion, this committee, and this work around how we support a management model there. One other person that
comes to mind that might be able to contribute in a subcommittee kind of way for this is Dave Pollard, who's our long-serving treasurer and super smart guy who's also been, had a long history of involvement with promoting the future reality of performance space on Bowen. So certainly these two and perhaps others who are not on this committee might be able to contribute to that conversation. It is a kind of the big elephant in the room. How do we all manage without a whole lot more resources? And I've had extensive conversations with Liam about this very thing. The existing core funding agreement that the Hearth has, it doesn't fund future growth in the Hearth's activity any more than the existing budget of the rec department funds growth of rec activity. So I just have to, make that very clear as well, that, it's a shared challenge, and we've all got to figure out a model that can work, that will be sustainable for, all of the organizations that are going to contribute to the use of the facility.
Very good, Rob. So you've just voluntold two people from the Hearth who are going to, one of them will be on the committee, either Gail or Dave. I'm going to ask you to do an action, and that is to ask them both and pick one and have them be on the committee. I will happily sit on this subcommittee. As Jillian said, you would like some of the advice, and Rob, if you can make it, that will be helpful. I think an action to charge this committee with is actually to look at two things. One is the larger aspirational model, which is looking long-term of what it'll grow into, as you said, Jillian, but it is aspirational. But in the short term, figuring out how to get started. And that's working within the constraints and confines that exist right now, and not see them as problems, but as circumstances that we need to deal with to get the ball rolling. And I think if the subcommittee is working on both those levels, we'll move forward, because one will be something that needs to happen quite quickly, that's feasible and works within the constrained budgets of everybody involved, and that document can look at things like building user fees that have been, there's surcharges that get put on ticketed events and things like that are revenue generated for specific activities that can generate revenue, that are separate from an agreement like a rental fee or a fee per use document. Venues have used those in various ways to address those kinds of issues in the short term, but they're not necessarily part of the aspirational document. In other words, you use them to get started, to solve a problem, and people understand what that's for. Can be to pay off a debt of a building. It could be used for upgrading facilities or a specific capital project. They're not meant to be the overarching thing. So I would just charge this committee to build a document that reflects those two directions. One in the short term that's practical about how to get the thing going, and the other one which is a more thoughtful document. Steph, you have all the people on that committee?
Yes, I have.
Excellent. And Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks, Kim. And I think that it's important that someone from the staff from the Hearth be on part of that committee. I know I'm away, but I certainly have been part of the white elephant conversation for 3 years. So I really think it's important that I be part of that. So add my staff.
Very good, Jamie. I'm just going to change it not to a white elephant, because we don't want to appear to be just of one particular culture here. So I'm going to make it, I don't know, like a gray elephant or something.
Okay. How about a pink one?
Pink.
A pink elephant. Very good. Yes.
Or rainbow colored elephant.
Any last comments on the management model? Good. And then next item, we're getting close on time. Actions and items from the previous meeting. Fraser, any quick reports on actions? That was on the
Could you
agenda?
guys handle this part?
Yeah,
My son
totally.
decided to learn how to walk just this moment, so I'm a little preoccupied.
Your life is over.
Yeah.
It's just another life has just begun. Yeah, I'm not sure. Review the action items from, we've only had one meeting, and I think we've kind of addressed, I mean, Liam, you brought up a few things just about how we proceed going forward that, you know, in terms of reporting and the meeting of the subcommittee stuff. Is there any, am I missing something from the last meeting?
The list was that number one, Jillian was going to send out a poll for the tour,
Oh,
which
right.
he just did. So everybody make sure you get a
Right.
chance to go through that.
Right?
Steph for booking bi-weekly meetings, which we've done. Rate sheet subcommittee to meet. I mean, we kind of did, minus Liam. Oh, bring ideas for subcommittees to next meeting. Does anybody want to add something?
The grand opening.
So just on that note too, I know that the steering committee themselves also have a very specific desire to be part of that. And so I don't know that it's this committee's responsibility to take full responsibility at the grand opening. I think it's going to be
No,
a shared
not direct,
initiative.
not only, yep.
Yeah. So I think that I just wanted to make sure that's understood. But yeah, we want to talk about that. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, go ahead, Kristen.
I mentioned it earlier, but I don't want it to drop off. I'm interested, I'm keen to know how the annual endowment grant, how much can be expected from that, and how the committee anticipates that it could be used to contribute to improving the facility, or I mean the experience in the facility is what I mean.
Annual endowment grant.
Can you get details in terms of what the limitations of that are?
I'm not the donor advisor. I believe the Arts Council is, so I'm putting it out there to a member of the Arts Council, whoever is the donor advisor and controls that grant. It's your guys' call.
Yeah, it's been researched and the information's been found, and the Performing Arts Committee will be meeting on that shortly.
Good.
May I suggest that report goes to the management model committee as well? And Kristen, if you're like part of that, like that's figuring out, because that's a potential revenue source that, you know, that is different from user fees. And so they should be part of that discussion and understanding what the limitations are, or if they're targeted funds or restricted funds, they go, this is what they're for. And it gets considered. And the other one, which is about the opening, the grand opening, I think let's just take a second to figure out structurally how it's going to work in relationship to this committee. Do we create a subcommittee that then works with the steering committee, or does the steering committee come and report here about where they're at and where things are going, just so that we have a really good, clear line of communication? Because that timeline, because that's my background is on-time delivery of events. And that was my very first question when I first got on the meeting was, when is that going to happen? And the organizing energy towards it, because it's an on-time delivery event, and it's going to impact when we have to have our shit together. So I just want to know structurally, like who's calling the shots on that and who's doing the planning of it. Very open. I'm looking at you, Liam, when I ask this, just to get a bit of a sense of like structurally, how does it work? Are they going to like report to us, and then we have some representation on their committee from us, or vice versa?
No, I don't think it's one committee reporting to the other committee like that from a kind of any different sort of stature, so to speak, rather than working together. And more so that it is to be more nimble and dynamic, to be able to, well, you know better than I do, but in terms of pulling this off, it'll be developed outside of the committee structure, and then brought to both committees for input and feedback, and ultimately getting that's on it. Ultimately, council gets to make the final decision around like, well, what's going to happen here.
I know that the Performing Arts Committee, as part of the Hearth Board, is also very interested in the planning of the grand opening.
May I make a suggestion, having lived through these before? I think that structurally having council be the one that makes the final decision, like in terms of calling the shots, may be problematic. I would actually suggest a slightly different model, that the council early on decide that they're going to give that responsibility to a committee, and even if it's a new committee, and say, you're responsible for
No
pulling this.
more committees.
But I think this one is an on-time delivery. This is an on-time delivery. And as you
we
said,
have 30 committees.
Then within the existing structure, that's why I ask it, like, we need to set up a group of people who are dedicated to the on-time delivery of this event. And if it isn't done through, it's either, like, as I say, I still come back to my question, is it going to be through some existing structure? We go, these are the people, join it, and away you go, and report back to the steering committee and ask for things of us. We're the management committee, the steering committee, and ask things from the Hearth and from the Performing Arts Committee. Like, it just needs to it's a group that needs together and start the planning. And they need to be able to be, as you said, Liam, they need to be nimble. And so nimble means a group of people who are given the opportunity to figure it out and tell the rest of us what they need. Yes, Judy.
There's 5 of us on the joint, the whatever that's called, the other committee, on this committee. And there's links between this and the Performing Arts Committee with the Hearth. So, you know, there's going to be, if there's people that are on that steering committee and people on council and people on the Hearth and people here that want to organize an event and make sure that it, you know, is big enough and good enough and fun enough, then, you know, we'll work through the details. But as long as it's on our agenda in terms of, you know, have we made some progress, and, you know, has this been sorted out? We have a little bit of time, God knows, but, you know, we can, I think we can try and keep it alive and move it in terms of it being an item.
Yes, Rob.
I wonder if it is, I'm looking to Mimi with, you know, event management experience. And I'm just thinking somewhere in all of this, you know, has to be someone who's going to take a leading role in this coordinating effort. And I'd just like to ask if Mimi has bandwidth and interest in taking on some coordinating leadership, you know, on tying it all together. I just see the need for somebody to be kind of a main point person.
And you mean specifically for the grand opening event?
Yeah, we're looking, I think Rob is voluntolding you that he wants you to be the coordinator of this subcommittee. Like, I agree with Rob. Need one person who's just going to say, I'm going to organize the meetings, right? And bring the people together and report back to us and say, this is what we're doing. And I agree completely, Judy, that it needs to be on our agenda every meeting, just to find out where we are with it, and not necessarily spend time in these meetings discussing how it's going to work, but just reporting where we are. So Mimi, you've been voluntold. Is it a yay or a nay?
I think I can do that. I just need to advise that I will be leaving the country in March. I don't know when the grand opening is happening. I will be leaving for at least 3 weeks.
Well, you can start, and if you have to be replaced, you will be replaced.
Okay, I don't, I
Okay.
hope I know what to do, but yes, I will,
Yeah.
I will accept.
So can I get clarity on what
Yeah.
Rob just told Mimi to do here? 'Cause,
Thank you.
Sure. I would say that it's to report back to this committee about, as Judy was saying, where we are with it. And so outside, offline of this meeting would be to talk to those people who are interested in organizing it and have a discussion and report back
Right.
on, and be able to answer questions that we have about where it's at. Yes, Judy.
And I think being clear in terms of what people want, so there's, what are the specifics in terms of First Nations involvement, and what are the specifics in terms of big donor involvement, and how do we deal with the dignitaries from the federal and provincial and whatever other funding sources, and how do we work with the major fundraisers, and or how do we the necessities in terms of making sure that the people are properly appreciated and recognized, and then whatever else that would, if we've got a bunch of federal and provincial and rich donors that are coming, it would be wonderful to have an event that they would remember as a particularly beautiful Bowen moment. When I did the long table dinner, it was like, there's still people saying, wow, that was such a Bowen thing. And that, that would be the reaction I would want to get from all of these visitors, that they have a sense of how good we can be when we're really good.
Wow. Thank you, Judy. I think you just scared the pants off of Mimi.
Well, and who are
Mimi's good at it.
helpers? Judy, I know Judith is going to help along with this, right?
Sure.
Absolutely. I think it's just more of a facilitator role and a coordinator role to make sure reporting happens. I think, does that help clarify, Liam, what we're looking for? It's like someone literally just to be the point person. So if, and to be gathering that information. You're right, Judy. So Mimi, it's just gathering expectations.
I just have one question about something that Judith just said, is that I feel a little bit what you just mentioned is a bit of engagement as well. And I'm not, as coordinator, equipped to do that proper engagement that you're talking about the interest groups.
I would say you're right. You're not expected to do that, but you're just keeping track that that's a need and making sure that someone's volunteered to look into that and be part of it. And from my perspective, there's enough people who are really interested and engaged already in making this happen and concerned about it, that there is the expertise already there. It's just a question of organizing and coordinating it. The expertise.
And just to be clear, could you just loop back and mention those interested parties?
Well, let's see it. I'm looking around the table here.
Mimi, so there's some actual requirements through our grant funding and they have a whole communication shop, right? And so they will be very involved as we get closer, and they'll identify who from the federal government and the provincial government will be attending, and same thing on the First Nation side. And so there's those kind of structural, well-established procedural pieces that we will definitely cover off. And then there's the more nuanced and subtle elements around the donor community, how does that get addressed? And so we can talk we can talk offline. I don't think we want to chew up the bandwidth of this entire committee on this, because we could spend all our time just talking about the opening events, and really what I'm hopeful for is that this group is going to help make sure that we have a stellar event, but that right after the event we have stellar policy and structure to operate the facility. That's what the primary.
Absolutely, Liam, and that's why I think, Mimi, you're going to take on the responsibility within this committee to make sure that all of the energy that's being directed towards the opening is coordinated. And there will be very specific people, like Judy's volunteered, you even volunteered, Liam wants to be involved, Harth wants to be involved. Everyone wants to be involved, but we just need to figure out how we get coordinated. And so that's just starting it. And these things have a way of taking on their own energy, which is exciting.
And it's not your responsibility, Mimi, to coordinate the entire event. That's not what.
I understand. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, unless you want to, then you and I will talk very soon.
Anyway, we're at time, but I apologize for taking more time than we're supposed to. Bad habit. I like to try and finish on time. The last thing, there's two things, but was an update from you, Liam, on the project update. Could you want to take 5 minutes and fill us in, hopefully?
Sure. I just want to respect folks' time, so I'm going to be really fast. And if people want to ask questions, go ahead. So essentially, the project, since we last met, doesn't look like it's advanced much from the outside. So not a whole lot of more siding and roofing has gone on, which I'll be honest is a bit concerning to me. And that's something that we do ask the builder about. But we're assured that everything's okay. And on the inside, though, things are ticking along quite nicely. And so drywall's going up, and taping of the drywall's happening. The majority of the electrical, plumbing, and mechanical is completed on the inside. There's still a fair bit of work that has to be done in the basement on those elements. And so we're getting to that. All of the internal insulation has been installed. And so it's really starting to feel a lot more like the space that we've anticipated, which is pretty exciting. There is a fair bit of work still to be done around the civil works around the building. And so that's like the primary power drops and water, and in particular the wastewater for the septic field, which is going to be to the north of the facility. We did get, I can't remember the timing of when we had a more detailed meeting with the builder about schedule. They are holding right now to the end of January as a completion date. With no disrespect to the builder, I think it is a bit of an ambitious schedule. I think it's a bit of an ambitious goal. I think more realistically, we're looking perhaps like March. I'm not trying to speak ill of them or in any way. I just know we're on an island, it's construction, we have holidays in the way, things like that. So and I'll stop there to see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Liam. That was very helpful. It still means because of that fluidity, I understand completely why things like the grand opening date hasn't been set, when things kick in for use of the facility hasn't been set. And I'll be honest with you, that doesn't scare me. In fact, it's useful to be flexible, gives us time to be thoughtful. And so from my perspective, that was good news. I know from yours it isn't, but from this committee's perspective, a little bit more time and having that flexibility doesn't slam the clock on things, which changes everything. Anyway, any other questions or comments?
At some point, we would like to do the tour again and update it.
I think that's actually that Steph sent out that poll. Jillian sent it out. I thought it was you. Thank you, Jillian, for doing that. Any new business or other business that anyone wants to bring up? Lastly, no, just a quick review, Steph, on the actions that we had. We formed 2 subcommittees, right? And we've given Mimi a position of kind of take on a coordination role for the opening. Is there anything else in the actions?
Yeah, we've added 1 or 2 members to the management model subcommittee, and Rob's going to reach out to them and circle back to us on who wants to participate in that group.
Okay. And I'll just add one other action, that each of the subcommittees need to meet at least once before we meet again. I know that's obvious, but
my favorite part.
Yeah. Yes. So can you put that in as a last action?
Okay.
Good. Any other last comments before I ask someone to call for an adjournment? We're all good. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that was the first time chairing this. Anyway, you guys were fabulous. Yay.
You are too.
I look forward to seeing you at the next one, hopefully in person. I happen to be on my way to Boston right now. So
Oh, too bad, eh?
yeah. No, well, it's whirlwind trip. I'm back on Monday.
Take good
Okay.
care.
Yeah,
Thanks,
good.
everybody.
Thank you very much. Oh, who moved to adjourn? Just for the minutes.
Oh, move to adjourn.
I
Thank
think
you.
as chair, you
need
have
to
the
do that.
authority to adjourn.
Oh, I have the
Yeah.
authority to do that in these kind of meetings.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I
Yeah.
call the meeting. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.